Good morning to everyone. First of all, I'm Piero Dominici. I'm an academic, a professor, but today I hope really, especially a man who shares some scientific interest and vision about the future of education. But first of all, I apologize with you all because I apologize very much because I need to remain seated because in November 2020 I was infected by a very aggressive and systemic COVID. And also today I have a lot of problems with my respiration, my eyesight. I use generally a lot of glasses with several perspectives of my studies, and for my hearing. So a lot of problems are very complex problems for me. But my feeling is going until at the end of my life for better situation, better objective. So. Good morning. My name is Piero Dominici. As I told you, I'm a professor at the University of Perugia, and I have to use, I forgot, I have to use also some notes because I have some problems with my memory. A little bit, but my memory, for example, when I'm speaking about a problem, is there the problem that I forgot what I was telling? I try to train to this kind of problem. So, my name is Piero Dominici. I'm a teacher at the University of Perugia, but I live in Rome. And I am also an official delegate for the World Academy of Art and Science. That is an international scientific and no-profit organization. You can check on the official site. And I founded in the 2011 an international research and education program whose name is CHAOS. The acronym is for Complex Human Adaptive Organizations and Systems. So I deal with complexity and with the perspective of and the possibility to try to educate and training our young people to complexity. So I really hope and honor to be with you, and I have a few time to discuss with you several points. I intend to start off challenging the very idea that complexity can be managed, and for this reason you can see the image of Black Swan. Black Swan. The Black Swan is an old metaphor. That was used also between the ancient, and it was defined and indicate the particular condition of all that unpredictable event. But I am convinced that this metaphor is one of the post-rationalization metaphor and instrument that we use to reassure ourselves about the impossibility to make predictable everything, make controllable everything, make rational everything. So, sorry. So, slide 3. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Oh. It doesn't work, the slide. Okay. Okay, I have to go. One domain of the objective of my talk today is to explain the urgency of changing the trajectory of those experts, educators, economists, and political leaders who persist in the erroneous conviction that in the near future it will be possible to obtain a complete understanding of virtually all phenomena, controlling and managing their complexity and eliminating error, doubt, and unpredictability from our society and our lives. Another objective is to discuss how to enhance our capacity. Okay, thank you. Okay. Can I tell you the number of slides that you... Huh? Is it possible? That okay, it's correct, it's correct. Another objective is to discuss how to enhance our capacity for recognizing, comprehending, and learning how to inhabit complexity. Because I think that managing complexity is a contradiction in terms. For example, hard sciences told us that complex systems are characterized for several characteristics, and one of the most important characteristics of the complex system are the emerging properties. Emerging properties are those dimensions of complex systems that we are not able to observe at the start of our observation. For example, our brain is the more complex, one of the more complex systems. Our brains, we can observe our brain. It is characterized from synapses, neurons, chemical substances, and electric interaction between the neurons. But we are not able to observe the emergent property of the brain that is thinking. So the impossibility to manage complex system and complexity is not only a slogan to try to have a position that is anti-conformistic position, is the data, the real data of the complex system. Slide 4. So is correct. Let us take a look at the difference between complicated systems, which are predictable, which are characterized from linear relation and interaction. So we are able to observe complicated system. We are able to measure complicated system. And when you think to the possibility of measurability, you mean that you have the possibility to predict the evolution of that phenomena. So, as you know, complicated systems are those systems that are mechanical, artificial, governed by linear interaction. Linear interaction are that kind of interaction that we can explain in terms of cause-effect, input-output, stimulus and response. But the nature of the interaction behind the complex system is a systemic interaction. All the parts are interconnected. So, complicated systems are generally artificial, as I told you, and mechanical. You also can break down their parts to observe their behavior. And this is also a metaphor of analytic thinking. We are continuing, for example, to be educated to linear thinking, causal thinking, and sometimes in the analytic thinking. Analytic thinking is based on the Cartesian approach, the idea that we can and we have to scompose a big problem in several parts, and then observe the singular parts and try to have the solution of the problem. I think that in the age of complexity and hypercomplexity, and when we are dealing with the complex system, we have to try to recompose the fracture, the separation between the parts. And we have to try to define and know the relation that is a systemic relation. So this is a particular image about the difference between complicated and complex systems. Complex systems, as you know, are vital, organic, human, social, and relational systems. But in nature, all systems, as you know, are complex. The whole of a complex system will never coincide with the sum of the parts that make it up. But will always be greater, richer, and more varied. The only way to study a complex system is to focus our attention on the interconnection and interaction between the parts. Not separate, but try to reconnect the parts. Slide 5, please. The concept of complexity first appeared in the last century when biologists and physicists, aware that it was becoming less and less feasible to describe the world or life using mathematical formulas or sets of rules as before, began to formulate the idea of systems for studies in their fields. Before this, many scientists have been convinced that science would sooner or later succeed in reaching a comprehensive understanding of virtually all phenomena, eventually controlling and determining their development and behavior. They soon realized, however, that traditional linear models and reductionist deterministic approach were no longer capable of analyzing the unstable dynamics of reality. From the first system theories proposed by von Bertalanffy and Weaver to Kuhn's demonstration that scientific methods of observation had become inadequate, and Heisenberg's formulation of quantum mechanics, Ashby's ideas on cybernetics, up through Simon's work on hierarchies, Herbert Simon, the Nobel Prize on Economics. A novel system approach to complexity was being developed by biologists, mathematicians, physicists, and other scientists, expanding to the social sciences as well. For example, the new science was set by Morin's paradigms shift and by others such as Gregory Bateson, Coleman, Luhmann, and Habermas. Slide 6, please. Complex adaptive systems. I tried to share with you a table with the principal characteristic of the several systems. Complex adaptive systems consist of extremely large number of reciprocally interactive, interdependent subunits characterized by a high degree of sensitivity to initial conditions. Probably the most remarkable property of complex systems is their capacity for adaptation and self-modification. So this is the dynamics of complex systems. And this makes them unpredictable, because the logic is continue modification and adaptation, and we are not able to observe. Adjustments stemming from the smaller subunits, passing through and involving higher and higher planes of subunits in a progressive hierarchy, eventually give rise to self-organization, duplication, transformation, and evolution. In other words, emergence. This is the characteristic of emergence. Emergence is an ontological dimension of complex systems. I forgot to tell you that I'm basically a sociologist with a methodological background and also a philosopher. So I have all the unimaginable imperfection for the paradigm of this hyper-technological civilization that is based on the conviction that we are able and we have to marginalize the human factors. Because human factors implies some particular dimension that particular logic of system are trying to marginalize and eliminate. What are these dimensions? The dimension of error, the dimension of unpredictability, and the dimension of assumption of responsibility. The subunits in this kind of system are individuals, entities, and relations that are constantly contributing to change and to co-create, Maturana, Varela are the referment, the condition of the interaction. This is especially easy to understand among human systems where emergence can even occur at great spatial or temporal distances. In these kinds of systems, what counts is not the spatial proximity of the interacting parts so much as the intensity of the interaction themselves. And this is another dimension of this particular kind of complexity. Another dimension is the role of the observer that is never neutral. If we observe a social organization or simple a group of people, or even a random set of people seen together, not only will the totality be superior to the total number of people, not only will we be unable to understand the dynamics of the group by isolating individuals or by narrowing our fields of observation, but we will be forced to realize that the same people, individuals, entities, are constantly modifying, co-creating, co-constructing the social environment in which they are immersed. So, furthermore, the scientific principle of observation that you know that it is always a fundamental pillar of the classical science, the principle of observability, is not good to try to define all the dimensions of complex systems. So, furthermore, the scientific principle of observation is not attainable in social systems. The human cannot be studied by an external observer. And I think that it's a great problem for us, this. As in all complex systems, but even more so, the observer is a part of the observed. The act of observing changes the object system that is being observed, and the observed is in turn changed by that he or she is observing. In sociology, the term that is often preferred is observer-participant. Slide 7, please. So, speaking of unexpected events, I should perhaps remind you that a very small change in a complex system can have an enormous effect on the entire system. This was first proposed by chaos theory and has been studied in chaotic system. It is known as the butterfly effect, with the very important studies and research of Schelling, with the idea that a butterfly flapping its wings could cause a hurricane in another part of the world. Speaking of chaos, the confusion between a complicated and complex system has been magnified by a similar confusion between chaotic system and complex system. Slide 8. I have a few time. I have to cut my thesis. What I've been told by our scientists, experts, and leaders, that the digital revolution, with its enormous amounts of data and information, more and more powerful instruments of data collection, and the incalculable augmentation of technological control would have ensured us that we would be making more rational choices and decisions, facilitated by the direct and simplified processes, even in democracy itself. And I think that complexity versus simplification is also a false dichotomy. The opposite of complexity and the complexity approach is reductionism, not simplification. But I think also that simplification is not, it's an important result, objective, and strategy, but it's not an absolute value. I think that there are some particular dimensions of our life, our social life, that are not simplificable. For example, education, communication, and democracy. In these decades, in these last decades, for example, we tried to reduce education to the digital education. We have tried to reduce democracy to a form of more direct democracy, with a logic or a greater narration about the possibility of disintermediation, to try to construct a democracy that are based on the idea of inclusion. Slide, you can check. Slide 10, because the time is so few. Slide 10. Why chaotic system can often be visualized to fractal based on the repetition of self-similar patterns manifested in different scales through space and times, and can thus be partially predicted. I am convinced that it will never be possible to predict or determine the pathways of complex systems, owing to the intrinsic properties that I have mentioned. The number of interacting, self-organizing subunits in a complex system render predictability impossible. To put it into semi-mathematical terms, the essential prerequisite for being able to predict the trajectories of a system is the capacity to measure initial condition with absolute precision, which in the case of a complex system would have to be infinite precision. For this reason, no future outcome can ever be accurately foreseen in a complex system, owing to what I have termed the inevitability of unexpectedness. Following this line of reasoning, we can no longer believe that we are on our way to setting up a perfect system of control and anticipation of future developments, reassuring ourselves and justifying the occasional emergency by calling it a black swan. No, in my opinion. Black swans are intrinsic elements of complex systems of our life, not unforeseeable exceptions, and the sooner we accept this, the sooner we will begin to learn how to inhabit complexity, not try to manage complexity. And I think that it's also correlated to my proposal about the urgency of educating to unpredictability. We are continuing to educate our young to rationality, to the idea of total rationality, and to the idea and vision that everything is measurable, everything is observable. And I think I use also the category of tyranny of concreteness about this. Slide 11, please. So I spoke earlier of some grand illusions of the hyper-technological society. I'm an optimist, not a pessimist. I want to clear this, but generally, complexity researchers and scientists are, there is the idea that we love to create other problems, you know? Complexity is explained as the idea of more difficult problem. The complex dimension of the problem is that the problems are characterized by several dimensions, several parameters, and several variables that are everything correlated, interdependent, and interconnected. So the illusion of total control and predictability are what lead us to believe that we can predict, determine, and control complex systems. I would like to discuss two other dangerous illusions, the illusion of measurability and the illusion that we can try to eliminate the error. And you can think also to the educational process, the educational process where we can try to eliminate error, to stigmatize error. Society today in general, and the hard sciences in particular, are obsessed with the measurability and concreteness. The insistence, for example, on STEM, whose acronym is, is for science, technology, engineering, mathematics, I think that is a new form of reductionism. As the educational goal is a perfect example of this. These hegemonic narratives today, and I can share with you, I like to keep in contact with you, also some scientific articles about this kind of topics. These hegemonic narratives today, pervading all of society, have reintroduced a form of reductionism, telling us that reality is made up exclusively of measurable, empirical, quantitative, and statistical data. Also to try to measure our thinking, our knowledge, our emotions. This obsession with facts, figures, statistics, algorithms, and quantities, which lead us to believe that the data can tell us everything. The data are fundamental. I'm also a sociologist, but I think that data are, needs our interpretation, needs the intervention of the experts, and what I call the tyranny of concreteness. Slides 12, please. So what about the illusion of measurability? The obsession with measurability leads to the tyranny of concreteness. What the data cannot tell us, however, is a vision of interconnectedness. And I think that is the problem of continue to educate to linear system, causal system, and analytical system of thinking. The challenge is to ask ourselves, what do we want to know about these points, and to attempt to understand the qualitative factors. The qualitative factors are what motivates us to go beyond the rationale of always looking for something useful, is what we do or study. Slide 13, please. Essentially, what we are trying, that is the table about my historical table about the false dichotomies that structure and characterize our educational and training institution. Essentially, what we are trying to do today is to create a society without, I repeat, a society without uncertainty or without unpredictability through the use of algorithms and artificial intelligence, that I think that are fundamental instruments and opportunities for us. But I think that the problem that we are trying to marginalize human factor, aimed to achieving higher and higher degrees of control. The problem of control and the surveillance is an atavistic problem for the human society. Among political leaders, educators, and communicators, the latest priority appears to be that of repressing conflict. But conflict guarantees evolution, change, and development. Of course, I'm talking about non-violent conflict, except in the case of serious oppression. The most ambitious goal, however, which technicians and engineers hope to obtain through the use of artificial intelligence, and I'm involved in several international projects that are trying to define the condition of predetermined and suggest the human behavior, is that of eliminating error itself from our organization and from our lives. But error, apart from being an intrinsic feature of complex systems, is a source of knowledge and vitality and an essential part of learning. Educators would do well to encourage error rather than to insist on predetermined or standardized answers. Error is what stimulates creativity and innovation. Error is what makes us free human beings. So the attempt to flatten out or eliminate conflict or error from social systems or communities is not only impossible, it is also a hugely repressive strategy, cutting off critical thinking, healthy dissent, debate, and the epistemology of error. My friends and teacher, Edgar Morin, spoke about the possibility of epistemology of uncertainty, to introduce it in the educational and training processes. As for the innovation that everyone is calling true innovation, can only come from the grassroots of our communities. On the contrary, a top-down innovation that is imposed by power, authorities, or select group of intelligentsia is nothing other than a non-inclusive would-be innovation, which will simply keep us running after technological progress without the necessary cultural tools to direct it. It should also be clear that what I mean by innovation. In every field of individual and collective praxis, innovation means questioning consolidated field of knowledge and methods, upsetting individual and collective imagination, unbalancing equilibriums, breaking the chains of tradition, leaving behind certainty to move towards uncertainty, with considerably greater risks, opportunities, really and perceived. Slide 14, please. How does all this need to come about? It is our educational institutions that should be preparing students to inhabit the future in a complex world. As I have shown, conflict and uncertainty are inseparable characteristics of complex systems, as are, even more significantly, three elements which are often the targets of today's digital gurus, convinced that they are on the brink of banishing them from our lives: error, doubt, and unpredictability. Coincidentally, but I believe significantly, they are the initials of these three terms spell the first three letters of the word education, EDU, error, doubt, unpredictability. Our schools should be encouraging conflict and debate as a means of teaching critical thinking, but the inadequacies of our educational institution are more than evident today. Slide 15, please. Alongside the tyranny of concreteness and the false dichotomies, as a limiting factor in the development of system thinking, in fact, is the incapacity of our educational institution to free themselves from the false dichotomies between fields of knowledge, which are suffocating any chances for social and cultural change. I'd like to share with you also another example. For example, in Italian universities, but I think not only in Italian university, we have the great problem, a very great problem, that is the rigid separation between the scientific sectors. For example, I am a sociologist, methodologist, and a philosopher. When I won money for an international project, when I publish a scientific article on a scientific journal or a scientific fund that are diverse from my scientific sector, these products are not considered for the evaluation of my career. So if I publish a scientific article on a journal of engineering or physics this is not evaluable for my career. So at the level of public discourse, everyone is for multi-interest transdisciplinarity. Everyone is for systemic vision of educational processes. But at the level of praxis, they are really obstaculated. And I think that this is the problem. You can think also for the particular emergency of pandemic. We are continuing to try to study and comprehend the complexity of pandemic, of global pandemic, reconducting the explanation of the pandemic to a reductionist and deterministic approach. So, slide 15, alongside the tyranny of concreteness as a limiting factor in the development of system thinking, in fact, is the incapacity of our educational institution, as I told you. I'm speaking about the artificial fracture between sciences and the humanities, between, for example, some historical fracture, nature and culture, between the human and the technological, between natural and artificial. But I am asking to you, what are today the limits and the bounds between natural and artificial? And on this generally architecture, we are continue to produce a logic of separation between the scientific sectors. Okay, 5 minutes, I have to cut. So please, slide 16. So the question we need to be asking ourselves, how can educational processes prepare students to inhabit complexity, not to manage complexity? We will have to complete reformulate our schools and universities. I think it's not a problem only of contents. It's the problem is how we are preparing to think to the complexity, to live the complexity system. Rethinking education to incorporate the principle of uncertainty and unpredictability. Our students will never become capable of analysis, systems thinking, or of using the scientific method. I have to cut. So please, slide 17, I have to cut. Sorry, but I shared my presentation and other scientific articles. So what we consider today to be the limits of the fields of knowledge, to be the borders between knowledge and skills, can and must become openings, passageways, pathways, opportunities. The approach we need to teach in our schools is one of the that stimulates students to becoming hybrid figures. This is a particular conceptual category that I use from the artistic language, but I'd like to be clear. The hybrid figures are not experts of everything. The hybrid figures have a particular preparation that is an epistemological, logical, methodological preparation. I think that the hybridization and the convergence between the several scientific sectors should be based not on the robotics, digital language that are important. They are important. I think that it should be based on this particular kind of preparation. Slide 18. So, what we have been witnessing in the recent years, and this is another concept that defines my study and research, witnessing in recent years, unfortunately, is what I call the grid mistake, which I mentioned earlier, which is to keep thinking of education and training as a question of purely technical nature, solely a problem of skills and know-how, and nothing more. A processes which must be dealt with by staking everything on speed and simulations. And I think that speed is the contrary of critical thinking. Critical thinking needs, 2 minutes. So more and more often, it is in the halls of education itself where this fatal error is being reinforced by systematically giving carte blanche, the total delegate, to technology. But technological innovation bereft of culture is meaningless because technology is a part of culture. I think that this is another false dichotomy, technology and culture. And when we try to keep separate these two dimensions, we construct our educational institution on the idea that we can keep separate humanities and hard sciences, for example. And at the end, can you share the slide 20? And so we conclude. So at this point, I would like to throw out also a provocation about the term of artificial intelligence. We have to share the definition of intelligence. If intelligence is only the possibility and the capacity to make mathematician operation, yes, it's possible. There is the possibility to have intelligence machine. We should find a new term, perhaps, for the man-made instruments whose purpose is to empower people and whose increasing capacities for memory, calculation, observation, deduction, and performance are being developed today by intelligent human beings. But I think that intelligence is a natural, a living capacity. What perplexes me, I have no problem with trying to make machines more like human. What perplexes me, what worries me, really worries me, is the desire on the part of human beings to become more like machines. We should ponder the reason for this quite deeply. I think that the problem that human beings are trying to become as machine, eliminating error, eliminating unpredictability. Thank you. Thank you. I think that we have some minutes for questions or comments. As I told you at the start of my speech, I'm so sorry because my condition, I have a lot of problems with my post-COVID effect. So I have to remain seated and I have to use some notes because I have some problem with my memory, eyesight. In November 2020, I was infected with a very aggressive and systemic form of COVID, with a problem for my respiration and memory. Sorry, but I'd like and I really hope that we can keep in contact for the future.
Professor.
Okay.
Professor, hello. Good morning or good afternoon. Thank you for Professor Piero Dominici. I'm sorry to hear that you were suffering this situation. I'm actually from UNESCO, and I wanted to introduce you at the start, but then I think actually I enjoyed this presentation a lot, because you have really mentioned a lot of very meaningful, elements about the challenges of education nowadays. My background is psychology and education, and I work for UNESCO. And actually, I experienced, in a way, what you have described, being part of this complex system, which is this big major conference. My paper said you have to be here at 11:15, and I was here, and I introduced the person. But then I left because I was supposed to it was over. But then somebody called me, no, you should be there. Why? Because it said 11:15. In the paper, and it is there. Yeah, oh, no, but there are 2 sessions, not 1. So you have to be in 2 of them. So then I learned that but how do I know that? Oh, it was in the email we sent 2 days ago. Okay, in the email with a lot of details that maybe I was doing something else. Anyway, but the point is that this idea of, and I wonder, and also a concern I have now is when you face inefficiencies in a complex system, you know, it's normal, it's usual. You know, as humans, you said we make errors. And then we tend not to be prepared to face errors, and then education is about not making mistakes. You know, it's like the emphasis, right? Not making mistakes. You know, but then we know that errors also have consequences, and they can be dangerous also for others, for nature, of course. Yes. So we have to care about that too, of course, you know, ethically. And so it's really interesting to me, this experience, and it's kind of nice to introduce you after I heard you, because because no then problem. I had the experience to know your thinking. I didn't know about you. I won't describe your curriculum. It's such a long career in wisdom, I think, inside you. No problem. And we can look details in Google. You are there in many search results. So we can see your background, and I think you're a good contribution to this conference. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you very much. Keep in contact, really. No problem. The ubiquity is not for human beings. So no problem. But I try to, in synthesis, to debate with you, to share with you the idea that today we are continuing to prepare not only our manager, our politicians, our decision maker, but our young people, our son, our daughters, to the idea that life is controllable, life is rational, life is predictable. And I think that this produce, when you enter in the world of the adults, this produce also psychological problems. And I think that also the separation between the scientific sector has the effect not only to separate the disciplines, the knowledge, but also to separate the people and their experiences. This model produced the idea that sociologists should speak and dialogue also with other sociologists. Physicists should speak also with physicists, and I think that this is the real problem. The other dimension that I have few time, and sorry because my memory is not at the best in this moment. The other problem that I would like to share with you, remembering a great philosopher whose name was Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt, in other historical age, told us about the problem of that in the Nazist and fascist regimes was characterized by the absence of thinking, and from the people who were mere executors of order. I think that today, with other conditions, yes, but some educational instruments and strategies, strategies, I finish, and strategies are finalized to educate and prepare mere executors of functions and rules that always, and a few times, always, often, are not able to try to reconnect, are mere executors of function. Thank you, and I really hope that we have other occasions. Thank you also for the patience.